Chapter 7. The Saturn Revelation landed in the command center with the force of a physical impact. For a moment, nobody spoke. The distant, almost philosophical threat of a 25,000 light-year signal was one thing. A direct active response from within their own solar system was another entirely. It was the difference between seeing a wolf's tracks in the snow and finding the wolf itself breathing on your doorstep. That's impossible. Hayes was the first to speak his voice, a strained whisper. He was an astrophysicist. Saturn was his backyard. There's nothing out there. Cassini surveyed the entire system for 13 years. We've mapped every moon, every Shepherd satellite, every significant rock in the rings. There is no transmitter. There is now, Eric said grimly, his fingers flying as he pulled in the raw data from the VLA's public server. The signal is strong, and it's not a reflection or a natural magnetospheric emission. It's complex, modulated. It's broadcasting on a carrier wave that's an exact harmonic of our 1.6 gigahertz signal. It's an answer. Dragon's focus was immediate and practical. Lockdown, he said, his voice cutting through the scientific debate. He keyed his comms unit, bypassing the main channels for a direct encrypted link. Initiate Protocol Omega, full lockdown. No one in or out without my direct authorization. Scramble air assets. I want a 24/7 drone patrol on the perimeter, thermal and multispectral. I want every sensor on this property slaved to my station. A mouse can't fart without me knowing about it. He turned to face the stunned scientists. Protocol Omega was a contingency so extreme they had only ever discussed it in theoretical terms. It effectively turned the 512-acre ranch into a self-contained military base. Is that really necessary? Hayes started to ask, but Dragon silenced him with a glare. We have an unknown intelligence with unknown capabilities that has just parked itself in our solar system and is now talking directly to a potential weapon of mass destruction buried in that mountain. Dragon stated, his voice dangerously calm. Yes, I think it's necessary. Eric, get me a secure line to the benefactor. Now, the benefactor was the project's owner, a shadowy billionaire whose fascination with the paranormal was matched only by his obsession with secrecy. He had provided the near-limitless funding, but his involvement was always remote, filtered through layers of intermediaries. A direct call from Dragon meant the situation had gone critical. While Dragon moved to a secure communications room, Eris and Hayes huddled with Eric around the main console, trying to make sense of the Saturn signal. It's not just a beacon, Eris murmured, watching the waterfall display of the demodulated signal. It was a cascade of intricate patterns, nested symmetries, and data packets of incredible density. It's a conversation. Look, he pointed to the screen. Here's our 1.6 signal from the Mesa, the baseline chirp, and here he indicated a new interlay signal is the reply from Saturn. They're synchronizing the two signals, one originating from the Utah desert and the other from nearly 1 billion miles away, were weaving around each other in a complex rhythmic dance. The Saturn signal would pulse, and in the microsecond delay that followed, the Mesa signal would alter its own frequency, as if in acknowledgement. Then the Mesa would pulse, and the Saturn signal would respond in kind. It's a digital handshake, Eric confirmed, his earlier fear being replaced by a kind of awestruck horror. They're negotiating a connection protocol, like two computers trying to agree on a baud rate before a data transfer. What kind of data? Hayes asked. Something big, Eris replied, his mind reeling. This handshake is establishing parameters for a massive bandwidth, orders of magnitude greater than the entire internet. They're not getting ready to send a message. They're preparing to open a fire hose. As he spoke, the ranch itself seemed to respond. The background hum, which had faded after the pulse, slowly began to return, but it was different now. It was a higher pitch, a more complex tone. On the perimeter camera, feeds small, shimmering heat distortions began to appear in the air at random locations like invisible campfires. What are those? Hayes asked, pointing to a monitor showing a field near Homestead 2. A shimmering orb-like heat signature was hovering a few feet off the ground. We're seeing them pop up all over. Dragon's voice came over the intercom from the comms room. My patrols are reporting them. They're electromagnetically active. They're interfering with our radios. The gateway is becoming unstable, Eris realized. or not unstable, more active. The handshake is causing resonance effects. It's like the walls of the tunnel are vibrating, and we're seeing the harmonics leak through into our space. Dragon re-entered the room, his face set like stone. The benefactor has been briefed, he said. He's concerned. He paused. He's also activating some assets. He wants optical confirmation of the Saturn transmitter. The Hubble James Webb Hayes asked. Something a little more proprietary, Dragon said cryptically. A military space-based observatory that officially doesn't exist. We should have imagery within the hour. The hour that followed was the longest of their lives. They watched the two signals weave their intricate dance, a silent conversation between worlds. They watched the camera feeds as more and more of the shimmering, heat-distorting orbs appeared across the ranch, their numbers growing from a few dozen to hundreds. They were drifting slowly, aimlessly, like jellyfish in an invisible current, their presence causing static to bleed across the video feeds. Then Eric's console chimed with an incoming encrypted file. This is it, he said, his hands trembling slightly as he typed in the decryption keys. Imagery from Sky Eye. A black and white, incredibly high-resolution image filled the main screen. It was the limb of Saturn, its majestic rings cutting a sharp line across the star field. And there, nestled in the Cassini division, a gap in the rings, was an object. It was not a moon. It was not an asteroid. It was a construct of impossible geometry. It seemed to defy Euclidean space, its angles sharp and unnatural its surface, a mosaic of shifting crystalline patterns. It was vast, easily the size of a terrestrial city, yet it seemed to absorb all light, making it a hole in the fabric of space rather than a solid object. And from its core, a single, impossibly thin antenna was pointed directly at Earth. My God, Hayes whispered, all the scientific detachment gone from his voice. It's been waiting. It must have been dormant. Waiting for a wake-up call, Eris finished his eyes tracing the alien architecture, and we provided it. We were the alarm clock. He looked back at the signal display, at the relentless, perfect synchronization between the Mesa and the alien ship. The handshake was almost complete. The final parameters were being set. He could feel it in the vibrations running through the floor, in the oppressive electric quality of the air. It's not just preparing to send data, Eris said, a terrible final certainty dawning on him. Data can be transmitted. This is different. A connection protocol of this complexity, with this much energy. They're not opening a communication channel. He turned to face the others, his face pale. They're opening the door. Part 4, The Door Opens, Chapter 8. Eris's words fell into a void of stunned silence. Opening the door was no longer a metaphor. It was a statement of literal, imminent, and terrifying fact. The proof came a moment later. On the main console, the two intertwining signals, one from the Mesa, one from the city-sized artifact at Saturn, suddenly snapped into perfect, rigid alignment. The complex dance of the handshake was over. They were now a single, unified signal, a carrier wave of unimaginable power and stability. Connection established, Eric whispered, his voice trembling. Protocol negotiated. Bandwidth island. It's infinite. The math breaks down. It's not a definable value. Simultaneously, the high-pitched hum permeating the ranch intensified, rising in frequency until it was a piercing, glass-vibrating shriek that forced everyone to clamp their hands over their ears. The hundreds of shimmering orb-like distortions that had been drifting across the property suddenly coalesced. They swarmed from every corner of the 512 acres, converging on the two focal points, the triangle and the Eastfield endpoint. On the LiDAR display, which had rebooted the ghostly image of the wormhole between the 2 points, flared into brilliant, solid-looking reality. It was no longer an invisible structure. The coalescing orbs were illuminating it from within, turning the tunnel of distorted space-time into a blazing corridor of white-hot energy that pulsed in time with the unified signal. It's a full-power activation, Hayes yelled over the noise, his face illuminated by the monitor's glare. They're stabilizing the terminus points. Dragon was already shouting orders into his comms. All security teams pull back to the command center. Full defensive perimeter. I want every weapon hot. We are no longer an observation post. We are a frontline position. On repeat. We are on the front line. The ground began to shake again, not with the deep hum of a machine, but with the violent, wrenching tremors of something being physically torn apart. A new alert flashed on Eric's console, this one from a series of high-precision GPS sensors placed around the mesa. Geospatial displacement, Eric cried out. The mesa itself is moving, the entire rock formation island shifting, twisting. The endpoint is dilating,